Are you guys aware, and as Maurice alluded previously this year in March, the GDPR became very prevalent to the European citizens. Just to go into the third parties, if I have a third party that contracts with a company and that company does not have the permission of the other company that they contract with to give away personal information, because it's all about personal information. It's not any information, you know, so your name, your address, for instance, and just to allude to your banking details, that is not permissible. The bank cannot, for instance, give away that information at all without your written permission. So your name, your address, and all of that. If it's personal information, it is not permitted to pass that on into a third party with the other company. Now, what companies do is you have your contractors and your subcontractors, and they pass it straight through, and then you are absolutely out there on your own. So that's not permissible. How many of you have been contacted by the banks recently? Or by a third party? Don't put up your hands. when you owe the bank something and they actually phone you. Okay. So what you can say over the phone is, you know, I'm now a guru on GDPR and POPI Act. Either if you're a European citizen, you can say GDPR. Are you familiar with that act, sir? Please don't read up on it, because you do not have my permission to phone me, please. And then I would love to hear what the banks are going to say about it. So this can become really hilarious. The POPI Act, but very real. Okay. The POPI Act as well, more prevalent to the South African citizens. The POPI Act, as with robotics and with all of that, we know we're on the forefront, but it's going to change, and it will change regularly. I mean, Southern Seoul, they already have robots that look after our children there. You might get married to a robot. Did you know that? Are you aware of that? In the future. Okay, so then the POPI Act and the GDPR will not be extending only to the digital market, but also probably, in all fairness towards all of us, towards robotics and AI, artificial intelligence. And that is where the real rubber hits the road. Because how far do you actually protect yourself against artificial intelligence and robotics that can search for all and any data that you might have? You know, 10 years ago, there was a friend of mine's colleague that I'm not going to mention any names or governments, but they were lucratively paid for all our individual information. And do you think it's legal now? It isn't. Okay. So, but what was legal yesterday is not legal now, might not be legal tomorrow.
No problem. So, POPI, and sometimes they call it POPIA, depending on which group of people you're sitting with. It's the Protection of it's the Protection of Personal Information Act. Okay. And remember, when we have an act that's already been assented to, which is signed by the president, and then afterwards we get regulations. Currently, we're at the regulation stage where they're setting up a commission who will be able to adjudicate these matters. Right?
So the GDPR being more extensive and more, if I can describe it, that data protection is more of an umbrella, like Sanlam's umbrella, and you stand under it, right? If there is conflict between the two, it will have to be thrashed out. My learned friend will also tell you, because it's an ongoing amendment. It's by no means the final versions for all of them. And you will agree with me, we're very global these days. So from a data perspective and a digital perspective, those spheres will grow into one. And more so with robotics and etc. and artificial intelligence, AI and so on and so forth. The world that we know now is not going to be the same in 10 years' time. So let's embrace that, but also at the same time be vigilant that the world around us is now very real in comparison to what the world will be in 10 years' time, maybe even in 5 years' time, even in South Africa.
So in the same vein, it's important to understand that POPI is by and large taken from GDPR. So the South African government didn't necessarily, or policy makers didn't necessarily reinvent the wheel. There was no need to. And so, you know, 95% of what you see in POPI comes from GDPR. And furthermore, the only difference is that GDPR applies to individuals. POPI, the South African legislation, applies to both individuals and companies. That's why we have a double whammy in terms of having to make sure that we comply. I just want to go a little step back, because I think when we do have an interactive discussion, I want us to have something a little bit more that you guys can take away from. But I want to create a scenario of a bank, because we all have a bank account. I hope that we all own a bank account, and so I'm sure you can understand the amount of data, personal data that a bank carries. And so, you need to be able to understand how the bank is protecting your data, what they are doing with it, what they should not be doing with it. And so, in the banking scenario, 25 million customers, many of them sitting out in rural areas, many of them sitting within the metros, right? So, how is it that a bank that is so big, that has so much data, how do they at the very least get consent? When Burg was talking about consent, how do they reach the grandmother who gets the allowance from her kids out in the rural areas? How do they get that lady to consent to information, right? And basically, it's important then to understand where your personal information, or what personal information is. It was the Net Rising guys who spoke about they want the very least information in order to be able to get your profile into the app. Very least information is key, because no company should be asking you for more information than what is needed. And furthermore, I'm sure you see when you fill out forms, they put asterisks where this one is optional, this one is not. It's part and parcel the reason why we have that, because you shouldn't be asking people for more information than what you need. Otherwise, you need to protect it more than what you probably should have. So that's very important to understand. Personal information is not just your ID, your name, your surname, etc., etc. It also goes as far as biometric. It goes as far as your fingerprint, your, what is that, retina, what, that fancy thing that people open the phone with it. So, it goes to that extent. That is your personal information. When you punch into your app, you want to find somewhere, you're trying to find this place, that information, that's personal data that you need to understand that it needs to be protected by somebody. If you know who GLONASS is, they're responsible. If you know who GPS is, they're responsible. So it's important to be able to understand that it extends beyond just you as a brand, and I'm going to call you a brand because if you're a business owner, sure, you should be a brand, right? And as a brand, obviously, you need to comply with everything, right? Furthermore, I want to talk about processing. The Act talks about processing of data, and processing includes the collection, storage, dissemination, merging, linking, degradation, erasure or destruction of information, right? Now I've listed them because I need you to understand that just taking information and it's sitting there, that's not processing. The minute you start doing something with it, that's processing. But if you're just an intermediary forwarding the information, you can still get away with it, right? But you will need to prove your case should something happen. So either way, you need to comply, okay? So I want to get into the part about erasure or destruction. So when you delete the person's information, let's say somebody comes and says, oh, I don't like Groupon anymore, I want you to unsubscribe, right? Half the time I unsubscribe and nothing happens, I continue to do it. But that's, it's just a player issue, maybe someone can tell us why. But unsubscribing is part of that erasure or destruction, right? And pressing delete on that where you don't have where we don't need that information anymore, what happens to that deletion? It's sitting in somebody's server. So is it actually deleted? Mm-hmm. So you actually need to be that savvy to understand that when you've written an email to supplier X to say, please can you delete my data, I don't want to see Groupon, I don't want to hear about it, etc., you need to be able to say, have you deleted it from your server? Here's a gray area. The gray area is where the companies, most companies, what do? They back up their systems, right? So is it deleted? Even if it's deleted in the server, but when was it backed up, right? So there are all these other things where you actually can't run away from it 100%, but the supplier or whoever has your information needs to make sure that they can prove to the commission to say, I did my best, I deleted her, I don't know what happened. I want to, speaking of Group 1, I want to talk about the Direct Marketing Association. We're all in that trap where we get calls to buy things we otherwise did not solicit, okay? And so having said that, the Direct Marketing Association is the most hit by this, this legislation. They are lobbying for days. It's a shame. It's not nice for them because this particular legislation actually sort of cuts them at the knees from a business perspective. And it specifically says whether you are contacted unsolicited, whether it's electronic or whether it's telephonic, whatever the case is, the Direct Marketing Association needs to understand, needs to tell you where they got their data from. They need to tell you how it happened, where it happened, etc., etc., etc. So it's going to be a little bit more difficult for them to get away with things. And just as an aside, you can go to the DMA website to actually insert your information to say, do not contact me. You can do that. And most companies who comply, most reputable companies actually go to that list. They get it and they cross-check it with their own data, and they remove the people who don't want to be contacted via the DMA Direct Marketing Association. So that's that by virtue of from a personal perspective. And remember I talked about consent being imposed by law, that you've got to be able to say yes. So sometimes consent is just a tick in the box online. Sometimes it's, they wait for you to come to the bank to fill out a form, and at the end there will be a line that says, do you consent to us processing your information? They will use those words because they are now aware that people are getting more savvy. Do you allow us to process? Yes, please tick. What happens if you say no? Do you get banking services? Right? So there are all these things that you also need to be reasonable about, while you also understand that they can't abuse your data. But you also need to be reasonable, and the law allows them to be able to say, okay, if I get your consent once, I will only do that which is absolutely necessary for purposes of making sure that you get the business. That's it. Nothing beyond that, nothing to profile you, to sell you something. So those are very important things that I need us to understand when we get out of this room, right? Just one more thing. I was talking about bring your own device. So bring your own device is a term we've been using for a few years now, where a company allows you to bring, or you as companies, you allow your employees to bring their own cell phones or to bring their own gadgets, and then you put your data, you put your email on that, etc., etc. Now imagine a guy working in a bank who is sitting with a phone full of how much data of customers, right? And it's his personal phone. It is, so obviously, some of you would understand encryption. Things need to be encrypted. If it's in your boot, sitting there, somebody steals it, they can do a world of things with it. If you charge R1 for every name on that laptop, you've got 25 million, you are gone. You have risen as a company. So data is the new currency, right? Data is indeed the new currency, and I think that's why I made it that simple. If you sell each person's data R1, 25 million, you're done, pocket, you're gone. Just buy one laptop. So, and that's the magnitude of what you need to understand when you're walking around with a company phone, or you're walking around with your own phone, where you have data sitting in that gadget. So that's something that I need that I need you guys to understand.
Thank you. So just to add to what my learned friend is saying here, the General Data Protection Regulation is, like we said, the umbrella. The best way to actually get rid of somebody, and you'll agree with me as well, is to have an opt-out button posed on your website or attached there to. Now, what happens if you don't have that? You can also send them an email saying, listen, dude or Dudes, I don't give permission for you to hand out my personal information, not all information, like you said, and it's indeed your biometric. So it's anything that distinguishes you personally from another person. in a nutshell, your fingerprints, your biometrics, your retina scans, etc., etc. So all and any are included. As we're hopping along, obviously there will be additions added to that. The POPI Act indeed was not rewritten, so also based on the GDPR. And in South Africa, unfortunately, we're a little bit, we lag behind the rest of and you'll agree as well, unfortunately, at this stage. But because everything is becoming global, we will indeed have to step up to the forefront with the rest of the world very soon, if not immediately. There is a robot, she's called Pepper, that is currently being imported to the banks. And for instance, she will ask, "Hello Marika, how are you? And how can I assist you?" And they would answer you back. And that is part of, do you know bot, anybody? A little robot that escaped from the lab overseas from inside to the parking lot. Now how did that happen? All thanks to AI, artificial intelligence. So all of these form one big network. And I would not be amazed if we are going to see a lot of amendments through robotic acts and laws, which, by the way, is not in place at all at the moment, especially in South Africa, I agree, and with, attached to the GDPR as well as the POPI Act. So that is all going to be an animal that's going to consistently transform as we see. So if you don't have an opt-out button, please let them know in writing that they're not allowed to use your personal information, for whatever task is at hand. And obviously, it cannot be duplicated either. So in that fashion. Okay.